After the Civil War, in the second half of the 19th century, we see an era that historians have described as the era of the new woman. The new woman is different than her parents or her grandparents. The new woman is more likely to receive some kind of education. We see the beginning of women's college education programs. We see the founding of all-female colleges that are well-funded for the first time. We see women taking that education and acquiring a profession with it. They are getting jobs outside the home. They're not just isolated to the domestic sphere. And they are entering the so-called feminized professions, becoming school teachers, librarians, social work, nursing. And they are developing an interest in social causes. They are helping join poverty relief charitable organizations. They are concerned with teaching immigrants how to read, things like this. So they're very much involved in their community. Lucy Hayes is kind of an example of a new woman. Lucy is our first lady to hold a college degree. She went to Wesleyan Women's College, which is in Cincinnati. Her curriculum would have been general liberal arts, so things like literature, French language, a little bit of history, music, art, things like that she would have studied. And she is a politician's wife. She's very involved in what's going on in politics, and she has an opinion that she shares with Rutherford frequently. She is involved in social causes. She's a very outspoken temperance advocate, and she lets her views on temperance be known publicly. And when Rutherford and Lucy become President and First Lady, they lead the nation together by creating a dry White House, encouraging people to adopt temperance values for themselves. And if we come over here, this is a young woman. This is one of Rutherford's cousins. Her name was Lucy Keeler. She is very much a example of what a new woman is. She is educated. Her father ran a newspaper and let her write articles at the newspaper. She becomes published widely. She has articles in Harper's Bazaar and the Atlantic Monthly. She's friends with, for example, Nellie Bly, the famous female journalist. She writes books. She writes histories on the Sandusky River. She's very involved in social clubs. She runs a garden club here in Fremont. She's very much an example of a new woman, and she does something that would have been unusual for her parents' generation or before. She chooses just not to marry. A lot of new women who get involved in professions, they like working. They like dedicating their lives to a social cause, and they choose not to marry. And that is something new that Lucy Keeler chose for herself as well. Throughout the 1800s, America had been having a conversation about who should have the right to vote. And should women have the right to vote is something that people were discussing throughout the 1800s. Early on, that movement is also wedded with the idea of giving freedmen, former slave men, the right to vote. After the Civil War, those interests diverge as black men gain the right to vote on their own, and women are somewhat left on their own to push for the right to vote independently. And you see the creation of women's rights organizations created by like Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and that conversation about should women have the right to vote will carry on into the 1900s. And as we know, women will gain the right to vote, they'll gain suffrage in 1920, 100 years ago this year. And in our exhibit, we talk about one member of the family, Rutherford and Lucy's daughter-in-law, Mary Miller Hayes. She married Rutherford's second son, Webb Cook Hayes, the founder of our museum. She becomes the first member of the family to exercise that new right to vote. On November 2nd, 1920, she writes about this in her diary, which is an excellent resource for us. She says, "This is a great day for women as they are casting their first vote for President of the United States." And she goes on to describe the day. Her and Webb got up early. They headed into town. They cast their votes. They cast their votes for the Republican candidate, who was President Warren G. Harding. And as she's writing this in her diary, she said, "It's later in the evening right now. Webb has gone in to check the returns. Looks like Harding's probably going to win." But this is a great moment for the Hayes family as she becomes the first woman to vote.